My name is Lucy, and I'm 31 years old. If you were to ask me if I ever had big dreams, the answer would have been a resounding yes. I used to dream of being a singer, one of those people who could stand on a stage and captivate an entire audience with every note. But as life often does, it quickly showed me the harsh realities. After college, I found myself working as a credit officer in a small bank in Raleigh, North Carolina. It wasn't glamorous, nor was it the career I had dreamed of, but it was stable and allowed me to pay off my student loans. Life had nudged me onto a different path than the one I had once envisioned. I met Nathan at a college reunion party hosted by one of my friends. He was a close friend of hers, and we ended up paired together for a celebrity guessing game. He had an easy laugh, a charming way with words, and, most importantly, he understood the dream I had set aside. Nathan, it turned out, had once chased his own artistic dreams. He had been part of a dance crew throughout college before eventually shifting to business, pressured by his family's expectations. We started dating shortly after that night, and for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Nathan treated me with kindness, showering me with little surprises. A pair of headphones here, a spontaneous dinner date there. Everything felt like a dream. A year later, we got married, and I made the decision to quit my job at the bank and focus on our family. Nathan worked in financial consulting in Charlotte, and his steady income made it possible for me to step away from my career. But shortly after our wedding, I began to notice something. Nathan's family wasn't what I expected. Nathan had a younger sister, Ivy, who had been involved in an accident when she was 8. Her family claimed she suffered nerve damage, which left her unable to speak or walk. At first, it was heartbreaking. A young woman bound to a bed and wheelchair for life seemed like a tragedy. But when I got to know Ivy, something didn't quite add up. Ivy was nothing like I had imagined. Though she couldn't speak, she communicated with a smile, through drawings and a letterboard. She was always so bright, so aware of everything going on around her. I remember one afternoon sitting with Ivy on the back porch. I pointed to the sky and drew a musical note in the air, and she smiled and responded by drawing a heart. I was astonished. She understood me in a way I hadn't expected. But then there was Linda, my mother-in-law. Linda was a quiet storm, always watching me with a calculating gaze. Everything I did was scrutinized. If I left Nathan's shoes lying around, she'd say, "If your husband looks like that, who's going to respect his wife?" My every move felt like a test, and the rules kept shifting. Everything in her house had to be in perfect order. Towels folded a certain way, laundry hung by color. Nothing was ever good enough. Nathan had always been the golden child, the perfect son, and I quickly learned that, to Linda, I was an outsider in the family. Even after our wedding, I could feel the invisible line drawn between me and them. It wasn't about love, it was about duty, expectations, and control. Every time Nathan and I visited his parents, Linda would show up at our apartment with a list of suggestions: how to clean, what to buy, and what I should have done differently. I began to realize that being married to Nathan didn't mean peace. It meant constantly having to prove myself to his family. My sacrifices were expected, not appreciated. But what I didn't know at that time was that Ivy, who had always been seen as the helpless, silent one, would be the person to change everything for me. It wasn't long after our first wedding anniversary that the cracks in my marriage began to show. Nathan, once so attentive, started coming home later and later. At first, I told myself it was just work. He had long meetings, projects to finish. But over time, the excuses didn't add up. He began to avoid my questions and withdrew further into himself. And with his absence came a quiet loneliness. I would sit alone at the dinner table, my food growing cold, as I stared at the empty chair across from me. As Nathan became more distant, I found myself seeking comfort in Ivy. Despite the tension with her family, she always greeted me with a smile, and though she couldn't speak, I began to communicate with her through drawings and signs. I taught myself some sign language during the quiet evenings when Nathan was preoccupied with his work. At first, it was simple phrases: hello, thank you. But slowly, it became a way to connect, to share our thoughts without the weight of spoken words. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, and Ivy's silent understanding was a balm to the isolation I felt in my own home. I remember one evening, After a particularly cold argument with Nathan, I went to see Ivy. As usual, she was sitting by the window with her sketch pad, but this time, there was something different about her. She seemed to be waiting for me. I sat beside her, my heart heavy, and signed, "Are you okay?" Ivy signed back, her face softening as she gently touched my hand. "I'm fine, just tired," she signed, but her eyes told me more than her words ever could. Ivy's quiet presence became the only thing that felt like home. But even as I grew closer to her, my mother-in-law, Linda, made it clear that my relationship with Ivy was something to be tolerated, not nurtured. Linda's biting comments about how I spent my time with Ivy, how I shouldn't be babysitting her sister-in-law, stung more with each passing day. But Nathan never seemed to care. He never stepped in to defend me, to stop his mother's relentless criticisms. When I brought up how hurt I was by Linda's words, Nathan would always shrug and say, "That's just how Mom is. You'll get used to it." And I did. I learned to carry the weight of those words, pretending they didn't affect me, even as they chipped away at my spirit. But as I grew closer to Ivy, I began to see the cracks in Nathan's family for what they really were. Ivy was more perceptive than I had ever given her credit for. She had seen the manipulation, the control, the silent power plays that had ruled Nathan's life, and by extension, mine. Then came the day when everything changed. It was a quiet Saturday morning, and I was making breakfast when Nathan came into the kitchen, looking more uneasy than usual. He placed his phone on the dining table and glanced at me, his eyes shifting nervously. "Lucy, do you have any plans for next week?" he asked, his voice cautious, like he was afraid of my answer. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. This wasn't like Nathan. He had never been concerned about my schedule before, and something about the way he asked felt off. "No, I don't have any plans. Why?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart began to race. Nathan hesitated before answering. "Well, my family decided to take a trip to Hawaii. My parents, Ivy, and me. It's just a family trip." I froze. Hawaii? That was the place we had once talked about visiting for our second anniversary. My excitement quickly deflated as I realized Nathan wasn't planning to invite me. "What about me?" I asked, my voice soft but tinged with hurt. Nathan glanced down at the table, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Lucy, this time, it's just a family trip. Actually, there's something important I need to ask you." I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. "My family wants to ask you to stay here and take care of Ivy while we're gone." His voice dropped, as if testing the waters. I felt a rush of disappointment, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. "Take care of Ivy?" I repeated, feeling the sting of being excluded. Nathan looked at me, his face slightly flushed, as if trying to justify his decision. "Mom says it would be too difficult for Ivy to travel that far, and she thinks you're the best person to take care of her. You're close to Ivy, right?" The words hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of the decision already made. My role in this family had always been clear to me, but now it was laid out in a way that felt so much more painful. I had always been the one to hold things together, the one who put everyone else's needs before mine. And now, Nathan was confirming it. My place in this family was to serve, to care for Ivy while they went off to paradise without me. But just as I was about to respond, the doorbell rang. Nathan rushed to answer it, and moments later, Linda walked in, wearing her usual stern expression. "I believe Nathan already explained everything to you, Lucy," she said, her voice cool and sharp. I stood there, trying to keep my emotions in check, feeling the suffocating weight of the situation. I stood in the kitchen, unable to shake the weight of the decision that had been made without my input. Nathan's mother, Linda, had already ensured my role was clear. I would stay behind and take care of Ivy while they went to Hawaii. Nathan, silent and distant, didn't say a word in my defense. "I'll take care of Ivy," I said, masking my disappointment with a faint smile. I forced myself to agree because I didn't know what else to do. That night, as Nathan went to bed, I sat by the window, overwhelmed by the silence in the house. Ivy's quiet presence had become the only thing that made me feel seen, but now, even that was overshadowed by the realization that Nathan was no longer the person I married. I had been left behind once again, but this time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be part of their family's plans anymore. The next morning, I visited Ivy. As always, she was sitting by the window, waiting for me. "I'm going to stay with you for a few days," I signed to her. Ivy smiled and signed back, "They left you behind again." Her words cut through me. But as I looked at her, I realized something. Ivy had been playing along for years, hiding her true self to escape the suffocating control of her family. It wasn't just me who had been held captive by their expectations. Ivy had too. That afternoon, when Nathan and his family left for the airport, the house felt strangely peaceful. I made a cup of coffee and brought it to Ivy, who was lying on her side, gazing out the window. I knocked softly and entered her room, only to be stunned when she sat up and walked toward me, without hesitation, without trembling. What are you doing?" I stammered. "I never lost the ability to walk or talk," Ivy said calmly. "It was all an act." I was in shock. All these years, I had cared for Ivy, helped her with everything, thinking she was helpless. But it had all been a lie. "I didn't need you to care for me," Ivy continued, "but you were the only one who saw me as a real person." Ivy had been pretending to be weak and helpless to avoid the control her mother had over her, and now, for the first time, I understood why. Ivy's revelation shook me to my core. Everything I had believed about my life, about Nathan, and about his family was suddenly called into question. All those years of pretending, of helping Ivy in her supposed helplessness, had been based on a lie. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this lie wasn't just hers. It was shared by Nathan and his family, and now I had the truth in my hands. Ivy stood before me, calm and composed, while my mind raced to process what she had just said. "Why now?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why tell me all this now?" Ivy gave me a knowing smile, her eyes glinting with purpose. "Because we're going to Hawaii," she replied, her tone light, but there was an edge of something deeper there. I stared at her, trying to make sense of her words. "You're going to Hawaii?" I asked incredulously. She nodded, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Yes, I have my ticket, the hotel's booked, everything's ready. And you, Lucy, are coming with me." I couldn't believe it. The woman who had been confined to a wheelchair for as long as I had known her was planning a trip to Hawaii, and she was taking me along with her. It didn't make sense. But then, looking at Ivy's serious expression, it became clear. This wasn't just a trip. It was the moment of reckoning, the moment we both needed to face the truth. "You've been planning this for a while?" I asked, still stunned. "I saved money my father left me," Ivy replied, her voice steady. "I've been waiting for the right time to show them who they really are. I'm not their burden anymore." Her words were a balm to the raw pain I had been feeling for so long. She wasn't just acting for her own sake. She was finally ready to live on her own terms, without hiding behind a mask of helplessness. And somehow, this trip was the key to setting both of us free. That afternoon, we boarded a flight to Hawaii. The plane was cramped and the journey long, but I felt a strange sense of anticipation. This wasn't just a vacation. It was a chance to confront everything that had been hidden from me. Ivy, sitting beside me, was no longer the fragile woman I had cared for. She was strong, defiant, and ready to face the world with a clarity I had never seen before. As the plane soared over the Pacific Ocean, I felt a shift inside myself. I had spent so much of my life trying to please Nathan and his family, bending myself to fit their expectations. But now, in this moment, I realized that I had been living someone else's life. This trip, this chance to stand beside Ivy, was my opportunity to reclaim my own. We landed in Honolulu, greeted by the blazing Hawaiian sun. The warmth of the air felt like a welcome embrace, but it was the sense of freedom, of possibility, that really took me by surprise. We weren't just escaping Nathan's family's control. We were stepping into a world where we could finally be ourselves, without the weight of lies or expectations. Ivy had already arranged everything. She led me to a luxury beachfront resort, where the staff greeted us as if we were the most important guests there. It was surreal. As we entered our room, I couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something new, something better. I sat on the bed, trying to absorb the reality of what was happening. Ivy pulled out her phone and began scrolling through reservations for dinner. "We're meeting them tonight," she said, her voice quieter now. I frowned, trying to piece things together. "Meeting who?" "Your husband and his mistress," Ivy replied, her tone flat, but her eyes were full of resolve. "They're at the same resort, I made sure of that." My breath caught in my throat. The weight of her words hit me harder than anything else that had happened. Nathan had never been faithful. All the time I had spent believing in him, believing in our marriage, had been a lie. But Ivy's voice was calm, and I could see the plan forming in her mind. This wasn't just a trip to expose Nathan's betrayal. It was a chance for me to finally face the truth, to stop being the one left behind. Ivy's eyes met mine. "Are you ready for this?" I nodded, my hands shaking slightly, but my heart felt steadier than it had in years. "Let's do this." After the confrontation at the restaurant, everything felt surreal. Nathan's shock, the panic in his eyes. It was clear he had never expected me to confront him. But the truth was out, and there was no going back. Ivy and I walked back to our room, and despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me, a sense of relief began to settle in. For the first time, I wasn't the one who had been left behind. Ivy and I sat in silence for a while. She had seen the way Nathan and Linda treated me for years, and now we both had the truth. Ivy looked at me, her face serious but soft. "You did well," she said. "I know how hard it must have been." I nodded. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I've spent so many years pretending that everything was okay, but now I see how wrong I was. Nathan never cared. Ivy didn't say anything right away, but her quiet understanding said everything. She had been living in the shadows of her family's control for years, and I could now see how much strength she had hidden behind the facade. The next morning, the Hawaiian sun poured through our window, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt awake, truly alive. Ivy had made plans for us to go to the beach, and the vast ocean in front of us felt like a symbol of the possibilities that awaited. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" Ivy asked as we walked along the shore. "Yeah," I replied, my voice calm but uncertain. "But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a choice." Ivy smiled, her eyes shining. "You do. We both do. We don't have to go back to that life." The truth of her words resonated deeply with me. I wasn't bound to Nathan's world anymore. For the first time, I realized that I was free to choose my own path. After the confrontation at the restaurant, everything seemed to move in slow motion. I couldn't shake the image of Nathan's face when he saw me, the shock, the guilt, but there was something more to it. His anger, his attempt to control the situation, told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was just a pawn in his game. Ivy and I walked back to our room, the weight of the night hanging in the air between us. The truth had been exposed, and there was no going back. As we entered the quiet, cool space of our hotel room, I felt an unexpected sense of relief wash over me. I had finally done it. I had stopped being the one who took care of everything, the one who silently endured. For the first time, I wasn't the one left behind. Ivy sat on the edge of the bed, her face thoughtful. "You did well," she said quietly. "I know it wasn't easy." I nodded, taking a deep breath. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I've spent so many years pretending that everything was okay, that Nathan loved me, that I was important to him, but now I see how wrong I was. He never cared. Ivy didn't speak right away, but I could see she understood. She had been through the same thing, in her own way, for much longer than I had. Her family had seen her as a burden, a problem to be managed. But Ivy had learned to play the part, to hide her strength, so she wouldn't be controlled. And now, she was reclaiming her life, just as I was. The next morning, we woke up early. The bright Hawaiian sun streamed through the curtains, and for the first time since I had arrived, I felt like I was truly awake. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was living for myself. Ivy had made plans for the day, plans that didn't involve Nathan or his family. We went to the beach, walked along the sand, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The ocean stretched out before us, vast and endless, just like the possibilities that awaited me now that I had finally stepped away from the suffocating grip of Nathan's world. Around sunset, Ivy pulled me aside. "I know what you're thinking," she said, her voice soft but determined. "You're wondering what comes next, right?" I paused, looking at her with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Yeah, I don't know what comes next. But for the first time in years, I feel like I have a choice. I don't have to keep pretending anymore." Ivy smiled, her eyes bright. "You don't, and neither do I. We both deserve better than what we've had. You don't have to go back to that life. You can walk away and I'll be here. We'll figure this out together." For a moment, I was speechless. There was something so powerful about Ivy's words, something that made me believe, for the first time in a long while, that I could start over, that I could choose my own path. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. I had reclaimed my voice, and with it, my power. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything I had left behind: the lies, the manipulations, the years of silence. And while it hurt to think about it all, there was a strange sense of peace that came with knowing I had done what I needed to do. Nathan would have to face the consequences of his actions. Linda would have to reckon with the truth. But me? I was moving forward, one step at a time, no longer holding on to the past. The days in Hawaii passed quickly, and with each one, I felt more and more like the person I had once dreamed of becoming. Someone free, someone who could live life on her own terms. Ivy and I spent our time exploring the island, enjoying the sun and the freedom that came with being away from the suffocating grip of Nathan's family. But as the days went on, I knew I couldn't run away forever. The truth had been exposed, but the consequences were still waiting. When we returned to our room one evening, Ivy turned to me, her face serious. "We can't go back to pretending anymore," she said softly. I nodded. I knew what she meant. The reality of the situation was that I couldn't just walk away from my past without facing what was left behind. Nathan and his family had caused so much pain, and I was still bound by the ties of our marriage. "I know," I replied, my voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I can't go back to that life. I need to move forward." Ivy gave me a small smile, her eyes full of determination. "You don't have to do it alone. We're in this together." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about what Ivy had said. The idea of moving forward, of not being defined by my past, was both terrifying and exhilarating. But deep down, I knew it was the only way. I had spent too many years living in the shadow of others, trying to please them, trying to make things right for everyone but myself. The next morning, I made the call I had been dreading. I contacted a lawyer in Raleigh, someone I had been referred to by a friend. I needed to take the next step, to make the divorce official. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew it would be a battle, but I was ready. Nathan had taken everything from me, but now I was taking back control. Ivy was with me every step of the way. She was no longer the quiet, passive sister-in-law. She was a force, and her support gave me the strength I needed to face what was coming. Weeks later, I received the court ruling. Nathan had been ordered to divide the marital assets, and he was required to pay spousal support for the next 3 years. The woman he had been seeing, Malene Harper, was sued for alienation of affection, and a civil compensation demand was placed on her. It wasn't just about the money. It was about justice. When the first payment hit my account, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a strange sense of peace. This wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my voice, my power. For the first time, I wasn't being defined by Nathan's lies or his family's expectations. I was defining myself. 3 months had passed since the court ruling, and my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The small apartment I had once rented while living with Nathan had been replaced by a top-floor unit in downtown Raleigh, overlooking Pullen Park. It was a new beginning, a fresh start. I had finally hit the reset button on my life, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living for myself. I had returned to my career in finance, but this time, it was on my own terms. I was an independent consultant, choosing the projects I wanted to work on with clients I respected. I had the power to say no to anyone who made me feel unsafe or manipulated. The constant pressure and expectation from Nathan and his family were no longer a part of my life, and the weight that had once threatened to crush me was finally gone. I stayed close with Ivy. After everything, we weren't just former sisters-in-law. We were survivors. We had both chosen to rise instead of settling for lives that weren't our own. Ivy had moved in with a close friend in Asheville and had finally enrolled in the graphic design course she had always dreamed of. When she told me, "You were the first person who believed in me enough for me to live honestly," I couldn't help but smile. Her bravery had sparked something in me too. We were both starting over, no longer living in the shadows of those who had tried to control us. One quiet afternoon, as I was tending to my balcony plants, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened the door, I found Nathan and Linda standing on the other side. They looked nothing like I remembered, gaunt, with dark circles under their eyes, their clothes worn and tired. "Lucy," Nathan spoke first, his voice weak. "I know this is unexpected, but could you help us?" I stood there in the doorway, not inviting them in, not saying a word. Nathan continued, "I lost my job after the lawsuit. They let me go without pay. Malene, she left me when she found out I had nothing. My dad walked out on her. She's out of money. It's just us now." Linda lowered her head, something I don't think I had ever seen her do before. "Lucy, I was wrong. So wrong. But I have no one else now. I just hope you can help us through this." The silence between us stretched, the wind rustling through the trees outside. I looked at them both, feeling nothing but a sense of finality. Nathan's voice trembled as he spoke again. "Lucy, I know you hate me, but I've realized my mistakes. I truly have. Just a little help." I took a deep breath and said slowly, "Funny. I once begged the two of you for just a little kindness, and now it's your turn." Nathan's face crumpled, his frustration growing. "Please, Lucy, just a little help." I smiled softly, but it wasn't with pity or remorse. "I don't hate you, Nathan. I just regret wasting so much time thinking you were worth it." Linda, red-eyed, tried once more. "You can't be this heartless." I shook my head, the finality settling in. "I'm not heartless. I've just learned how to set boundaries. And mine is this: I won't go back to anyone who once disrespected, used, or betrayed me." I calmly closed the door, leaving them standing on the doorstep, the weight of everything they had done to me hanging in the air between us. I walked back into my apartment and sat down, feeling a strange sense of peace. I had closed that chapter of my life, and nothing would make me go back. The past no longer had a place in my present. Later that evening, as the sun set over Raleigh, I sat on the balcony, hugging a knitted pillow Ivy had once given me. I felt completely at peace. The life I had built for myself was mine, untainted by the manipulation and control I had once endured. The past had been painful, but it had helped me rediscover my worth. Not all endings are perfect, but some endings are necessary. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of a life lived in silence. It was the beginning of a life I chose for myself. From my own experience, I realized that sometimes strength isn't about holding on to a relationship. It's knowing when to let go. I was betrayed, dismissed, and left behind, but those things helped me rediscover who I was. Life doesn't end when someone walks away from you. It truly begins when you decide to move forward for yourself.